Let's play the Ocarina of Time and go back, shall we? To a time where physical media was far more common. Today, everything from movies to games seems to come digitally, which is great for the modern era. Saves you space, you won't lose or break your games, and it's available immediately on launch. No more standing outside at midnight. But there's something about holding a game that's just, well, special. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's nostalgia. Maybe it's the fact that I own this copy and I can do whatever I want with it. CDs and vinyls are making a comeback surprisingly, but nothing's really captured our heart like games have. And perhaps no franchise has done better at that than Zelda. This franchise started back in the mid-80s, before most of you were even born. Let's be honest. And back then, gaming was different. It was a special time of quarters in arcades, trading cheat codes in the playground at lunch, and most of all, cartridge gaming. And while the Nintendo Switch carries this medium forward, and I love that, these little carts are a far cry from the innovative and interesting cart designs of the 80s and 90s. A typical Switch cart is a black, thin little SD card, essentially. They don't have different colors or unique special editions. They're pretty bland. Even the taste, which apparently has a bittering agent to dissuade kids from eating them, is also bland. Oh God. But let me ask you, when I say Zelda, what color do you think of? The modern Link lately has been sporting this blue tunic. In Japan, he has far more color representation, and in fact, many of the Zelda games there were green. But in the West, things were different. At first, most NES carts were this gray bland color. There's nothing special here. The only thing that gave life to an otherwise dull cart were the stick-on logos. But then came along a little game called Zelda. Holy crap. This wasn't just a regular cart. Oh no. The second you walk into a rental store, your eyes were blinded by the golden shimmer that came off of this epic game. This epic adventure game, which has stood the test of time, spanning nearly 40 years, needed to be bold to start. So, in a marketing move of genius, Nintendo of America worked out a ploy to increase sales and visibility by making this gray cart into an epic gold. The manufacturing details around these carts from Nintendo are fascinating, but we'll save that for another time. Suffice it to say that Nintendo was in control of the quality, color, and size of every single cart publisher sold. Most were gray, like this, but Nintendo saw a potential gold mine. After the blistering success of Zelda in the East, Nintendo knew they had another major hit to follow Super Mario Bros., which debuted with the console. Nintendo of America was able to convince their HQ that a golden cartridge would increase visibility and notoriety of the game, and they were right. All initial NES Zelda carts were this fantastic golden color, and so too was the follow-up, Zelda 2, but there were gray versions as well. Nintendo would eventually re-release most games in order to satisfy demand, and later copies of Zelda typically reverted back to this gray color, kind of like a best hits version. The original Zelda sold 6 million copies in its lifetime, and it's believed that most of these were the gold cart. So, ironically, the gray version might be rarer than the gold version. This was also the case with its sequel, Zelda 2, which also debuted on the NES. Again, like its predecessor, it also had a rarer gray cart version, but the history of the gold cart was only just beginning. Cue the Super Nintendo, and this time they were dominating the market once again with a new and modified cartridge. Still typically gray in the West, these carts finally decided to start showing some color. Notable examples include the incredible red Spider-Man cartridge. In '91, Zelda saw its next major entry with A Link to the Past. In the East, it came in a gray cart, but the label and box were in its typical Zelda green fashion. Here in the West, Nintendo of America continued its gold streak, but this time it didn't see the need to make the cartridge gold. Instead, they changed the label and the box. No longer was it that minty green, but instead was a bold gold color that we've come to know and love. Link's Awakening for the Game Boy saw the same treatment, offering a golden background to the label, but again, no gold cart. Various other handheld Zelda games released, but they were red and blue. Pokemon. In fact, by this time, people had begun to resign their hopes about any special edition of Zelda game happening again. With the Super Nintendo sales slowing down and rumor of the N64 just around the corner, would there be any more gold carts left? Cue 1998. The N64 had been out for a little while, led by the all-star Super Mario 64. And by this time, it was prime for Zelda to take the stage once again. Initial screenshot and test screenings were incredibly positive, showing off a fully rendered 3D Link exploring a world like never before. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was on its way. Nintendo of America knew they had to be creative. Audiences were hungry for this next Zelda title, and to generate buzz, they created a mastercraft of advertising. advertising. In various magazines, they began pushing the ye snooze, ye lose adverts, which showed an epic limited edition golden cartridge of Zelda for the N64. Nintendo produced and distributed their initial batches of the Ocarina of Time gold cartridges in this fantastic color. Something you might not know though is that not every Ocarina of Time cart is the same. On the back, there are small numbers which indicate their version. On the initial gold carts, for example, they were all designated as a 1.0, which means that certain tricks, glitches, texts, and sounds were different versus later versions. After the initial release, they produced a few 1.0 gray carts as well, before producing a modified version of the game with 1.1 versions. They produced an even smaller batch of the golden 1.1s and a lot more of the 1.1 gray carts. By the time we got to the 1.2 version, they were now entirely all gray. No more gold cartridges were left. These also saw the introduction of major changes, like altering Ganondorf's blood from red to green and removing the epic chanting in Fire Temple. While Nintendo was busy with these updates and revisions, a smaller team was working on a sequel for this hot title before the next generation hardware, codenamed Dolphin, began. What was originally only supposed to be an Ocarina of Time Master Quest, check out this video here for the full story, Majora's Mask came out as a second dark horse to the series. In many ads, they stated that Majora's Mask was to be released in a collector's gold card edition with a holographic sticker, and without a doubt, this thing lived up to the hype. This thing is epic. And there were tons of ads promoting this thing. Wait a minute, this ad here, the end is coming September 11th. And is that the Twin Towers? Anyway, in fact, every copy of Majora's Mask, save for some prototypes, all had a gold cartridge with a holographic label, and perhaps there's a few reasons why. Majora's Mask was at the end of the N64 life cycle, released in 2000. The GameCube was right around the corner. On top of this, Majora's Mask sold roughly half of what Ocarina of Time did. Potentially discouraged by this sales slump, which is by no means a failure, still selling over 3 million copies, they never went on to produce a gray cart for Majora's Mask. And in many ways, this is where the gold cart died. After the Nintendo 64, Nintendo began to embrace disc-based media at long last. Following competition, they decided to innovate by using these smaller microdiscs. In the East, Wind Waker took on a fresh new look and color with this fantastic blue background. Even the disc was blue, and in many ways reminds me of the themes of Tears of the Kingdom and modern Zelda. But here in the West, the gold theme at least continued. We got a new golden cover and a golden disc, but it's not a special edition or anything. This was just the new standard, it seemed. Interestingly, the re-release seems to have adopted the blue look. Same thing happened with Twilight Princess. The original GameCube version had a black and gold coloring, but this was actually changed just to be gold for the Wii version. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the international version had a totally different color scheme. It seems that the US releases were the only ones that had any gold associated with them at all. The next major installment, Skyward Sword, featured a gold box in the West and everywhere else. Perhaps the last and only uniformly gold release. But by now, the game disc was no longer gold. In fact, it was blue. And if you look back, there has been a ton of blue associated with Zelda, starting with Wind Waker. The only gold disc you got here was the Symphony bonus disc you got. And after this, there isn't much gold to be seen. A Link Between Worlds, while not a main title, did see a return to the Link to the Past color scheme, which was cool. We got all these nice golds and a dash of red, but predictably, in the East and worldwide, it looked like this, a colorful green pasture. And after this, we enter the modern era of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. While Breath of the Wild saw a Wii U edition, which did have a minor brown disc, the carts and the logos were now mostly blue. In fact, the majority of Tears of the Kingdom was also this white and blue. This blue now becoming the new color of Zelda, starting with Wind Waker. Was this the real color of Zelda? Was this it? Was there no more gold left? Was the gold mine completely dry? Well, Tears of the Kingdom might just surprise you. They released a special in-box edition that was their signature gold on black look, seen all the way long ago on Link's Awakening. Games aside, Zelda consoles have also featured a lot of gold. I'm especially attached to the golden Majora's Mask 3DS console, so maybe the gold color hasn't totally faded. It's just more of a special and reserved color for unique Zelda products. And again, that's only if you're in the West. If you live in other parts of the world, you might think otherwise. You might think Zelda, that's blue. Or maybe you'll think, no, he's the iconic green. But let me ask you, when I say Zelda, what color do you think of? I'm Brando, and thanks for hanging around. I'll see you all next time.